Imagine you are the parent of a type 1 diabetic child. Not type 2. Type 1. The kind where the pancreas produces no insulin at all. The kind where, without a daily injection of the drug, the body starts consuming itself. The kind where missing a dose is not uncomfortable. It is fatal. You go to the pharmacy. You hand over the prescription. The pharmacist tells you a 3-month supply will be $3,700. You do the math. That is over $14,000 a year. For a drug your child cannot live without. For a drug your child will need every single day for the rest of their life. Then someone tells you, drive 2.5 hours to Tijuana. Walk into any pharmacy there. Buy the exact same insulin, made by the same manufacturer, for $600 for 3 months. The same vial. The same molecule. The same company name on the box. $600 versus $3,700. So, before you get comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what you last paid at the pharmacy. It's always eye-opening. And take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely find this worth knowing. Now let's get into it. And here is what makes this story different from every other drug pricing story on this channel. Insulin is not new. Insulin is not experimental. Insulin is not a miracle breakthrough from last year that cost billions to discover. Insulin was discovered in 1921, over 100 years ago. The scientists who discovered it sold the patent to the University of Toronto for $1. $1. Because they believed no one should ever profit from something people needed to stay alive. So what happened between 1921 and today? That's exactly what we're going to find out, right here on Pharma Facts. To understand the insulin price, we first need to understand what insulin actually is. Insulin is a hormone. Your pancreas makes it naturally. Its job is simple. When you eat, your blood sugar rises, insulin is released, and it tells your cells to absorb that sugar for energy. Without insulin, the sugar just stays in the blood, building up, damaging organs, eventually shutting the body down. For people with type 1 diabetes, the immune system has destroyed the cells that make insulin. Their pancreas produces none. 0. They need injections of manufactured insulin to survive. This is not optional. This is not a lifestyle drug. It is as essential as oxygen. The original insulin, extracted from the pancreases of cows and pigs, worked. It kept people alive for decades. It was cheap, it was widely produced, and by the 1980s a vial cost a few dollars. Then something changed. In 1982, the first genetically engineered human insulin hit the market. Made by Eli Lilly, in partnership with a biotech company called Genentech. It was cleaner, more precise, and more consistent than animal insulin. It was also almost immediately more expensive. Over the decades that followed, the big 3 insulin manufacturers, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi, began a systematic pattern that a U.S. Senate Finance Committee investigation would later describe in detail. They did not compete on price. They moved in lockstep. When one raised prices, the others raised prices. When one introduced a new formulation with a slightly different molecule, the others followed. The Senate investigation found that the list price of Humalog, Eli Lilly's insulin, rose by over 1,200% between 1996 and 2019. Not 12%. Not 120%. 1,200%. On a drug whose core molecule had not fundamentally changed. On a drug people cannot choose not to buy. A 2020 study in the Mayo Clinic proceedings put it plainly. The manufacturers of insulin know that patients who need it will spend whatever it takes to acquire it. It is a matter of life and death. That knowledge is not incidental to the pricing. It is the basis of it. Now here is where the story takes a turn that rarely gets reported. The big 3 do not simply raise prices because they can. The American drug pricing system has a hidden layer that actually makes high list prices more profitable than low ones. It works like this. Between the manufacturer and the patient sits a network of middlemen called pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. 3 PBMs control roughly 75% of the American prescription drug market. Their job is to negotiate with manufacturers on behalf of insurers and employers. The way they get paid is through something called a rebate. The manufacturer gives the PBM a cut of every sale, a percentage of the list price, in exchange for being placed on the insurer's preferred drug list. Here is the critical detail. The rebate is calculated as a percentage of the list price. The higher the list price, the bigger the rebate. which means PBMs make more money when drug prices are higher. So when Eli Lilly raises its insulin list price, it can also offer PBMs a bigger rebate. The PBM is happy. The insurer gets some of that rebate passed back as a discount, and the uninsured patient, or the patient with a high deductible, pays the full list price. A USC Schaeffer Center analysis found that by 2018, for every $100 spent on insulin in the US, manufacturers were only keeping $47. The other $53 was going to the middlemen in the supply chain. The list price goes up. Most of that increase flows to intermediaries, and the patient pays the sticker. But across the border in Mexico, none of that system exists. Mexico has no PBM layer, no complex rebate architecture. Pharmacies buy insulin from distributors at a negotiated price and sell it with a straightforward markup. The result is that a vial of Novo Nordisk insulin that costs $300 in a Texas pharmacy costs around $30 across the Rio Grande. And Americans noticed. The U.S. government estimates that close to 1 million people in California alone cross into Mexico annually for healthcare, including prescription drugs. Border towns like Tijuana and Nuevo Laredo have large, established discount pharmacies that openly market themselves to American customers. One patient documented her experience. She was quoted $248 for a single vial of Humalog at her American pharmacy. She drove to Tijuana and paid a fraction of that for the same drug. She described standing in a Mexican pharmacy and feeling, for the first time in years, like her son's life was not contingent on her bank balance. That is not an anecdote. That is what a broken pricing system produces at a human scale. Now here is the number that crystallizes the entire story. A Senate Finance Committee investigation found that between 2014 and 2018, Eli Lilly spent $395 million on research and development for its insulin products. In that same period, it spent nearly $1.5 billion on sales and marketing for those same products. And the three products generated $22.4 billion in revenue. The argument that high insulin prices exist to fund research and innovation does not survive contact with those numbers. Nearly 4 times more was spent advertising the drug than developing it. The drug itself is over 100 years old. The prices exist because the system allows them to. And the system allows them to because the people who benefit from the system have spent decades making sure it stays exactly as it is. Now, something did change. And it matters. In early 2023, under enormous public and political pressure, and with the threat of generic competition finally on the horizon, all 3 big 3 manufacturers announced sweeping price cuts. Eli Lilly capped out-of-pocket insulin costs at $35 per month. Novo Nordisk cut prices by up to 75%. Sanofi followed with a 78% cut on Lantus. These were real reductions. Millions of Americans with diabetes saw their costs drop significantly. But here is what the data also shows. Those cuts happened not because the system changed. They happened because the companies chose to make them under pressure when it became strategically necessary. No law required it. No regulator ordered it. The same companies that raised prices 1,200% over 2 decades decided, voluntarily, to bring them back down, which means they could just as easily be raised again. The insulin price crisis was not solved. It was paused. Here is the number to carry with you. $1. That is what the scientists who discovered insulin sold their patent for in 1921, because they did not believe a life-saving drug should be owned by anyone. $30. That is what a vial costs in Mexico today. $300. That is what the same vial cost in the United States before the 2023 price cuts. 1,200%. That is how much the price of Humalog rose between 1996 and 2019, on a molecule that had not fundamentally changed since it was first synthesized. The drug is not expensive to make. The drug has never been expensive to make. It was cheap for decades. The scientists who gave it to the world tried to make sure it would stay that way. What happened between then and now is not a story about science or research or innovation. It is a story about who controls the pricing, who benefits from keeping it high, and what a system looks like when nobody is legally required to ask whether any of it makes sense. That is what the Senate testimony, the Finance Committee report, the Mayo Clinic analysis, and the border pharmacy receipts all show. Over 1 million Americans cross international borders every year to afford their medication. Some drive 2 hours. Some fly. Some ration their doses and hope. Alec Rayshawn Smith was 26 years old when he died because he could not afford $1,300 a month for his insulin. He tried to stretch his doses. He didn't make it. His story is documented. His name is on the record. He is not the only one. This channel exists to follow the data, trace the money, and explain exactly how this system works, in plain English, without the spin. If that is the kind of story you want to understand, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.